Hello folks, I'm John Myrie and welcome to the Wisconsin Northland Outdoors. On this week's show we have reports and tips for you from Ken Milender down at Hayward Bait and Bottle. And then we talk fly fishing with Hayward area fly fishing guide Wendy Williamson. Lots to cover on this week's show, all coming up right after these messages.
The fishing opener has come and gone. If you fished it from an old, inadequate boat, were stuck on shore, or worse yet, didn't go out at all, we can help. Hayward Power Sports has an awesome selection of new Lund boats, rigged and ready. You'll find the 1650 Angler, the 1775 Impact, the 1875 Crossover, and many more. We're offering massive Hayward Power Sports discounts up to $7,500, plus we'll throw in a free storage for next winter. Come see us at Hayward Power Sports, just 10 minutes east of Hayward on Highway 77.
Riding along in my automobile.
Bumping into things unexpectedly? Make your first choice for collision repair. Ernie's Auto Body, featuring the most advanced collision repair facility in Northwest Wisconsin. With a state-of-the-art spray, bake down, draft paint booth for that better-than-new finish, laser technology for precision frame alignment, loaner cars available, computerized estimates, written guarantees, and documented unmatched customer service, the clear choice is Ernie's Auto Body, south of Hayward on Highway 63 and Nursery Road, where quality is no accident.
Lynn's Custom Meats and Catering welcomes you to stop by for their great lunch menu. And while you're there, Lynn's also has a great selection of custom-cut meats and sausages, as well as many varieties of snack sticks, jerky, fresh cheese curds, and much more. Lynn's is open Mondays through Fridays from 9 to 5:30 and 9 to 4 on Saturdays. Lynn's Custom Meats and Catering in Hayward.
Today, anglers fish longer. Today, anglers fish harder. Today, anglers rely more than ever on their electronics. It all comes down to catching more fish, and today, anglers rely on Amped Outdoors lithium batteries, period. Visit ampedoutdoors.com today to power your outdoor experience.
We're down at Hayward Bait and Bottle. I'm talking to Ken Milender down here. And Ken, now the fishing season's open. There's been a lot of people out that first weekend.
Yeah, had some rain and weather, but the fish were still biting well.
And I heard some pretty good reports on the walleyes in a lot of places, but then it's as typical, there was people that were struggling too.
It's all about presentation and the movement of the fish from shallow and deep, but there's good reports. Jig and plastics and jerkbaits did pretty good on some of the lakes.
I think it's just a simple matter of if you're not fishing where the fish are, you're not going to catch them, and I think that's the case with just about every place.
Yeah, some of the larger lakes, you can have 8-degree water temp, and temperature is pretty important in the spring.
Well, and temperature is in everything in my book, because if you find the warmer water, you're usually going to find the fish. And, it's the old saying that, only 10% of the water holds 90% of the fish is probably pretty close to correct. There's a lot of water out there that you can be wasting a lot of time in.
Yeah, some of the lakes, the crappies were on the beds, and some of the females already left, and then some of the crappies on some of the lakes were staging still.
Yeah, one particular lake I was fishing on this last weekend, I had big female crappies out in 8-10 feet of water yet, way away from any place they'd spawn, middle of the lake.
Yeah, if you're going to go out, crappie fishing in the next couple of weeks, if you want to catch them on the beds, go to the larger lakes, you'll have better success.
You bet. And I know there's been quite a few people out crappie fishing. It seemed like the crappies and the walleye seem to be the big thing people go after.
Yeah, well, they taste pretty good in the spring, too.
You bet. And I think it's going to remain good for a while. I mean, I don't think we're getting an early spawn by any means on a lot of fish here.
Well, now water temp gets like 64, like everything's going because all the bait is up in the shallows. So till the bait moves off the shallows, they're going to be really accessible.
And you mentioned smallies. Smallmouth fishing has been really good. I've had some pretty good reports on that.
Yeah, a gentleman come in the other day, and I says, well, just go grab a jerkbait and go on these spots. He called me back the next morning. He caught 2 over 23, so he was pretty happy.
And this time of year, they're pre-spawn, and they're kind of still bunched up. There'll be a lot of areas that won't have them, and then you get into a spot, you're going to catch multiple fish.
When they're staging on the steeper breaks going up, they can be up to schools of 20, 30 fish, and then there'll be small groups, anywhere from 3 to 8, that will roam up on top. So you just have to, cover some water.
Well, and I've had lots of times where if you get into a bunch of smallies, you hook one and you got 2 or 3 of them chasing him down.
Yeah, have your partner be ready because you can always catch a double.
And as far as pike fishing, you hearing anything on the pike at all?
There's a group that came up from Texas, and they were buying, doing pretty good on the toothy critters, and they were buying 1-ounce rattle traps and having pretty good success.
And we've got pike in most of the lakes up here now. Years ago, it was only a handful of lakes. Now they're everywhere. And there are a handful of lakes up here. I believe Coudray, Chippewa flowage, and I think Tiger Cat flowage. A few of those lakes, some of them, you have to look at the book on it, but some of the lakes went to a 10-bag limit on the pike this year.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And don't overlook, if you're looking for fish to eat, pike are very good table fare. I mean, they're right up there with walleye as far as I'm concerned. You just have to learn how to get the Y bones out.
Yeah, well, in the spring, their meat's going to be a lot firmer, and it's not as fishy taste. A lot of times in the middle of summer when northerns don't taste as good, is because they let that slime get on the meat and it's not washed off really good. And then if you catch a northern, you put it on ice right away, it makes a big difference too.
One of the other guides a while back gave a good tip too. He says if you take some white vinegar and put it on a cloth and wipe off your pike, it'll wipe the slime right off them.
Yeah, I never heard of that. That's a good point.
You bet. Well, anyway, something to try. I've never tried it. But as far as the largemouth fishing, you heard anything there? I'm sure the bass clubs are starting to get out there now.
I guess over treelands on chatterbaits we're catching a lot on in flowage.
You bet. Well, flowage is a great fishing lake, too. And musky season, I don't know what that's going to be like once it gets open here. We're getting really close to that, too.
Yeah. Usually this time of year, you see people complaining that muskies are robbing their sunfish and crappies, but I expect that to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and some of the smaller lakes, typically, once we get to that opener and over the holiday coming up, you'll be looking at, some of the smaller lakes, the river lakes, those things that warm up quicker or got going earlier, those are the ones that are going to be a little more active as far as the muskie action.
Yeah, I've heard of some anglers trout fishing, catching some smaller muskies out on the river.
You bet. And I know you guys are all geared up here for everything. You got a huge selection of bass plastics, walleye stuff, muskie stuff, panfish stuff.
Yeah, this year we packed this store as much as we could get in here.
Yeah, it's amazing the amount of stuff in here. And, the big thing has been the plastics over the last 10 years. It seems like more and more and more stuff out there. More people are starting to go toward using the plastics and artificial lures more than anything else, I think.
Well, I think the driving factor is, technology on different types of plastic. For instance, Z-Man's got that floating product for both panfish and smallmouth and largemouth. And, it's like, you can stretch that stuff out without it, breaking. That's one product. And then the scent-infused products that are coming out nowadays. So it just seems to be
never ending.
Yeah, with the cost of live bait, you can go through a dozen minnows and you can use the same bait and catch, just as many fish.
You guys got all that here and a huge selection of musky stuff and information. People want information on lakes and lake maps and stuff. They can stop by.
Yeah, like we just got in the finishers and the credges that are different baits by Berkeley that, boy, the wallies and smallies are going to it's going to create a whole new way of fishing.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you for taking the time with our listeners here.
All right. Thank you, John.
Well, folks, we need to take a break right now and hear from some of the fine sponsors that make this show possible every week. When we come back, we'll be talking fly fishing and getting started in fly fishing with Hayward Fly Fishing Guide Wendy Williamson. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after these messages. Hayward Bait and Bottle is your one-stop for the Hayward area's largest selection of rods, reels, lures, fishing electronics, boating supplies, and much more. Whether you fish for bass, walleyes, panfish, or muskies, gear up for the upcoming fishing season, and if you're getting ready for the spring turkey season too, they also have just about everything you'll need for a successful season. In the bottle shop, you'll find a full selection of beer and liquor. Hayward Bait and Bottle is your one-stop sport and bottle shop.
The Hayward Lakes Visitors and Convention Bureau in Sawyer County, Wisconsin welcomes you to our Northwoods hometown. No matter the season, no matter the activity, you'll always be surrounded by our great outdoors. What more could you ask for in a vacation destination? Woods, waters, world-class events. Contact us for information on lodging, dining, attractions, events, trail conditions, and more. Order your free vacation guide and start planning your getaway today. Visit us at haywardlakes.com or call 1-800-724-2992.
The fishing opener has come and gone. If you fished it from an old, inadequate boat, were stuck on shore, or worse yet, didn't go out at all, we can help. Hayward Power Sports has an awesome selection of new Lund boats, rigged and ready. You'll find the 1650 Angler, the 1775 Impact, the 1875 Crossover, and many more. We're offering massive Hayward Power Sports discounts up to $7,500, plus we'll throw in a free storage for next winter. Come see us at Hayward Power Sports, just 10 minutes east of Hayward on Highway 77.
Welcome back to another segment of this week's Wisconsin Northland Outdoors, and this part of the show is brought to you by the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau. For more information on lodging and vacationing here in the Hayward Lakes area, check out their website at haywardlakes.com. Well, folks, we talk about all different types of fishing here on the show. On this week's show, we're talking with Hayward area fly fishing guide Wendy Williamson about how to get started in fly fishing and a lot more. On the show today, we've got Wendy Williamson, who used to own the Hayward Fly Fishing Shop, a fly fishing company, and also been a fly fishing guide for a lot of years. We're going to talk fly fishing. Well, Wendy, glad to have you on the show here for the first time.
And I'm glad to be here, John.
You know, you grew up in the Hayward area, I think, didn't you, originally? And then you wound up out west fly fishing as a guide, right?
That's correct. I'm fourth generation Hayward, and I was out west for 10 years before coming back here when my father died in 97. And that's when we moved back here. And then in 2004, we bought the shop. And I've been guiding for 29 years.
Wow. You know, when you're talking about those western rivers, they're kind of like the mystique with the fly fishing out there. It's what makes those rivers so great, and what's the difference between fishing there and here?
Well, one of the main things that I can think of is water temperature, because it's the water out there typically stays pretty constant. And like our main river here for trout, the Nemacoggin, that water will get up, it can get almost 80 degrees. And when that's just way too hot for trout. So
yeah, trout actually, they really are one of the fish that really suffer real quick when it comes to higher temperatures. They just can't tolerate it.
Yeah. That and muskies also, you know, when it starts pushing 8 or 70 degrees, you want to leave them alone.
You bet. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that, too, as we get going in here. But, you know, let's talk about fly fishing. Fly fishing is not just a trout fishing thing. A lot of people think it's a trout fishing thing.
Yeah, that's the misconception is exactly that. And fly fishing is sometimes a better technique to use in various situations, and it's not as difficult as you think. It's mainly a different way of casting. It's where you have a fly which weighs practically nothing, and you're throwing the line. So it would be a coated line, so heavier line than what you use for throwing hardware.
Yeah, you know, and that's one thing I've always said, too, is that I think a versatile fisherman or angler out there should add fly fishing to their, systems that they use, because there's times when fly fishing, whether you're fishing for trout or you're fishing for smallmouth bass or muskies, there's times fly fishing is going to be more effective than, casting with what you guys call gear, or what we call just lures and tackle. Mm-hmm. But there's times when it's the other way around, too. It's amazing what's changed in fly fishing a lot.
Well, a lot has changed in fly fishing. First, when the movie came out, River Runs Through It, there was this big push of interest in it. But I have to say, in our area, one of the most amazing things that I can see that's happened is the interest in the warm water species. Not just trout, but
bass, muskies,
pike. Panfish is my favorite.
Yeah. Well, there's always been a few people that fly fish for muskies going back 30, 40, 50 years or more. I know I fly fish for muskies many, many years ago. Then all of a sudden it caught hold where there were more and more people out there.
Yeah, I know. I was on the board of the Hall of Fame with Bill Gauchi, and Bill was back in the 50s. Had a gentleman that would come for 2 weeks and exclusively fish with a bamboo fly rod for muskies.
You bet. Well, and there were no world records for muskies when I came up here in the fly division, and none at all.
Of all the things, when it comes to records, that one's pretty wide open. It's all the species, and then it's the tippet, and then there's various categories. So there's a lot to be broken.
There is, and some of them, though, are pretty substantial fish, because I know the 6-pound tippet line, that thing's a pretty big fish.
Absolutely. So, I mean, but to do it just to get a record, you can kind of be creative, you know what I mean?
You bet. Anyway, let's talk about, other fish. There's nothing actually more fun to me than going after bluegills with like a little 4-weight fly rod. I mean, it's a blast.
Well, I know that the very first fish that I ever caught on a fly rod was a bluegill, and it was with an old bamboo rod that my dad must have came back from the war with. It was up in the garage, and went out on Spring Lake out on E, and didn't know what the heck I was doing, but we caught the daylights out of him. My little brother was throwing, bait, and I was fly fishing, and I said, "What's so hard about this?" And then I went for trout later. So,
well, and I've been on the Chippewa flowage where I've taken a lightweight fly rod and just a little, actually a jig with a little or a tiny hook with a little plastic on it. And every cast, you make one false cast, they lay your fly or your bait out there, and a bluegill's got it. This is every cast you get them sometimes.
Yeah, they're very eager to eat. I mean, they're not as selective as some other species, but it's also an amazing way to teach somebody how is for the bluegill because they are so eager to eat.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because it's not that hard to get going, or it's not that expensive. You can buy a $600-700 fly rod, maybe a lot more than that even, I think, just like a musky rod, but you can get started pretty reasonable and be pretty effective out there.
Absolutely. I can recall my very first rod that I bought was $35 from a hardware store in Rice Lake. It was fiberglass, and it had the things they needed, and I learned how to cast it. And in hindsight, it was a club, but, it's still, any fly rod's better than none.
Oh, yeah. Well, the advantage to the graphite, more so, when you're fishing walleyes, for instance, with a spinning reel, it's the sensitivity, but it's not so much the sensitivity with the fly rod, it's the speed of the rod, and it's also the weight.
Yeah. So, and to understand fly fishing, a lot of people think it's very complicated, but it's basically the numbers. And when it comes to fly fishing, like a 0 weight through maybe a 14 weight is not the weight of the rod itself. It's the weight of the line that it's throwing. So it's measured in the first X amount of feet in grains, and you don't have to know that, but it designates what weight it is. So your rod had better be able to throw that effectively and not be too heavy a line on it, or it won't perform either. So you want to balance that. Well,
one of the tricks to learning to fly cast too is getting the timing right. When you come back in the back cast, you got to let that rod load up before you start again, and that's where I see a lot of people have a problem. They come in the back cast and they come forward too quick.
Well, it's totally opposite what you would do if you were spin casting, to come back and stop and then give all the effort on the front. It's more important to get that line moving initially and stop. I like to say upcast more than back, because what you're trying to do is basically the tip of the rod is going almost in a straight line. Just like if you were to have it tied onto your finger,
Yeah. Well, yeah, and then when it comes back, it rolls over and basically it'll load up that rod.
Right. And the more line you have out, the longer that's going to take. So it is timing. And after a bit, you don't even think about, you can actually feel it happen.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about, it's not that expensive. And we'll get into talking a little bit about gear too, but it's not just a stream fishing or river fishing thing, because I've caught a lot of muskies on fly rods out of a boat. I know a lot of other people have too. And you could catch fish, smallmouth, anything else out of a boat on a lake.
Well, on the lake and also on the river, I mean, you can catch saltwater fish, and you just have to adjust your equipment naturally for the type of fish that you're going to catch. And the conditioned saltwater's tougher on equipment, but so in the freshwater here.
Well, folks, we need to take yet another break and hear from even more of the fine sponsors that bring the show to you every week. When we come back, we'll have the second part of that talk we had with fly fishing guide Wendy Williamson. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after these messages. Hey folks, come on over to Hayward Ace Hardware and check out the area's largest selection of firearms, ammo, and accessories. We carry top brands like Browning and Sig Sauer, and we have a great selection of the newest and hard-to-find models. We've got a large selection of ammo with more coming in daily. If you need a scope, we carry great brands like Leupold, Hawk, and EOTech, and we'll even mount it and bore sight it for you too. We even sell suppressors and silencers. And don't forget to check out our Guns of the Week. Huge discounts on a variety of pistols, rifles, and shotguns that change every week. So stop on in to Hayward Ace Hardware, your firearms superstore. Hayward Ace Hardware, Highway 63 North in Hayward, or give us a call at 715-634-8700.
Hayward Animal Hospital is a full-service medical and surgical hospital featuring on-site laboratory, digital and dental x-ray, in-house pharmacy, and online store. Dr. Ostrander has 40 years of experience dealing with illnesses, injuries, surgery, and dentistry. Hayward Animal Hospital offers urgent care appointments and emergency surgery daily. Please call early in the day for these appointments. They open at 8 a.m. Hayward Animal Hospital is located 1 mile east of Hayward on Highway B. Call 715-634-8971.
Hey folks, the Log Cabin Store in Northwoods Beach on Highway K between the Big Lakes has groceries, ice, beer, liquor, and pop, and now has all new tackle and bait supplies. All current antiques and household items are now on sale and all must go to make room for the sport shop. That's at the Log Cabin Store in Northwoods Beach between the Big Lakes.
If you'd like to have your time fishing be more enjoyable and productive, hiring a fishing guide can be a good investment. Whether it's learning more about fish patterns throughout the year, learning how to use your depth finder to find the best spots and fish, learn how to use that GPS to get the most out of it, or learn better boat control. A day on the water with a guide can really help you to be a better angler, as well as make a day on the lake very enjoyable. To book a guide trip this year or get more information, you can find us on the internet at www.wiscnorthlandoutdoors.com and then just click on Area Guides.
Welcome back to the last segment of this week's Wisconsin Northland Outdoors. And folks, we're going to jump right back into the second part of that talk we had with fly fishing guide Wendy Williamson. Well, let's talk about the gear to start with. What weight rod should a person be getting? Obviously, that affects what they're going to fish for.
Right. That would be the first question. What do you intend to catch? I mean, what are you going for? Say around here, like if you were saying, I just want to do panfish, I would even bump it up to more like a 5-weight, and that would cover you if you want to go for trout also. Or, if you get out and it's kind of windy, a 3-weight can kind of be a bugger in the wind. And some of those fish tug pretty good, and you never know what might eat.
Yeah. Well, how about if we move up to a smallmouth bass, or if you want to have to be on the lake, you're going after largemouth or muskies?
Yeah, I would at least 6 would be the lightest I would go. Typically, we would do 7s and 8s, and it's not only to handle the fish because those fish can get big, and in the river then you got current besides, but it's also because you're throwing bigger flies.
Yeah. Well, when the muskies, you move up to a 9 or a 10, don't you usually?
We don't. I don't know many people who can throw a 10 all day.
Yeah.
9-weight is about as heavy as we go.
Yeah. Well, when I used to fish them a lot years ago, I threw an 8-weight rod. I had a head and 8-weight, and that handled it. Well, I remember one fish. It was like kind of out of boat. It could get kind of crazy because a fish came at the boat, wound up airborne, and bounced off the top of the outboard motor in the back of the lake on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely get away with an 8-weight. There's no doubt.
You bet. As far as reels, reel is just basically a line storage thing.
Right. We always say you could use a pop can or something, and just because I have yet to reel in a muskie. A saltwater fish is different than when they take you onto the reel, but just by stripping that, or bass, we just strip them in.
Yep. Well, how about the line or the line itself? I mean, you've got intermediate lines, you've got weight forward, you've got floating lines. What's the best selection there for a beginner?
Well, I can answer most of your questions with it depends. And the thing about the fly lines, if you were to go out and just buy a kit or something, it's going to have a floating line. Floating line is probably the one that you would be used most often because you can always use a fly that floats or add weight to it and accomplish that. But if you're targeting, say, muskies, and especially in the fall and stuff, they're going to be kind of down deeper.
Yep.
And so you want an intermediate sink tip. You can there's some methods that you can add a sink tip to a floating line. So there are ways to get it down there because you want to make that presentation look like it's supposed to, or they're not going to eat it.
Well, and that's true, too, because I know most of the fly fishing I've done for muskies, I fish with a weight-forward floating line because I fished a lot of hair bugs and topwater stuff for them. But late in the fall, then you definitely want to switch to streamers and something goes deeper.
Yeah, absolutely.
How about size of baits? I mean, one thing I've noticed over the years is that for the last 40 years is that these musky flies get bigger and bigger and bigger. Is there really any advantage, you think, to go to a real big fly? I mean, I think big fish want big baits sometimes, but I'm not so sure they're not getting a little bit shy from those big things, because they can look at a small bait and not see it. It's fake just quite as quick as it can something big.
Well, I've got a different take on that. And yes, they will eat big things, but day in and day out, I think they eat smaller things more readily, like kind of a sucker or something of that shape, and they don't like spiny, and sometimes they get so crazy. But more than anything, it's just too hard to cast.
They're heavy. They're real heavy, and as far as casting distance, I mean, there used to be a guide up here years ago that he was always trying to convince me that we had to be able to cast all the way through the fly line to hit the backing before you were effective. And I kept telling him, you don't have to cast that far for muskies. 99% of the time, it's all short casts.
Well, and it's hard to control your line at that distance also. You're better off. It's surprising how close that you can be to these fish. And, I always chuckle at people in our boat, when I'm guiding for muskies on the river, they'd say, is that musky water? And it's like, well, pretty much all of it is.
All of it is. Yeah, it's all musky water. And a lot of times you're running in the same places that got smallmouth bass, too. Because if you're dealing with rivers here, it's pretty much all smallmouth bass a lot or muskies.
Yeah, lots. Every once in a while, we'll even catch a largemouth in spots. It's kind of crazy, but smallmouth and pike are always out there. And we have caught a number of walleye and not even trying.
Well, that's an interesting thing, too, because a lot of people, they think walleyes, they're going to eat crawlers and leeches. But, I think one of the biggest predators we have in these lakes up here is a walleye. Walleye's a vicious predator, actually, when it comes to other fish and stuff.
I can attest to that, yes.
I've caught them on topwater baits before, more than once. I mean, you'd think, well, I think the biggest reason you don't catch walleyes on a lot of different baits and presentations is it's not down deep enough for them. It's too far out of their strike window.
Right. And on the river, I mean, a lot of this that I'm talking about is on the river, because I don't do a lot of, bass or musky lake fishing. But also, it's really difficult where the walleye are, is using some of the nastiest stuff, and you're moving, which makes it even more difficult. But the good thing about fly fishing is if you don't like where your fly is, you just pick it up. You don't have to reel it in.
Yeah, and it's there's a lot of interesting things when it comes to flies. And, one of the things that flies, I mean, originally, especially for trout, you're trying to imitate some kind of insect hatch, and they're trying to match the hatch thing, but there's thousands of different kinds of aquatic insects.
That's true. But, there's like times of the year where a specific insect should be happening. So likelihood of them keying in on that. But there are some flies that are so generic that they could imitate a number of different insects. But with a fly, you can do leeches, you can do frogs, you can do crayfish. It's just endless, the amount of food items that you can imitate.
Well, Wendy, I know you guys are kind of not guiding anymore, but you actually have a river thing where you're taking people down the river, right?
Yeah, we do that. And, every once in a while, somebody wants to learn how to cast or have some lessons or whatever. We're flexible. You
have a website, and you also have some other social media places?
Well, probably the best way to get a hold of me would just be to message me through Facebook, I would guess.
Well, thanks a lot, Wendy, for coming on here.
You're welcome, John. Thanks for coming.
Well, folks, we're about out of time for this week's show. I'd like to remind everyone out there that if you miss a show, go to our website at wnoradio.com. And from there, you can link to our podcast site, and the show is also on Spotify and Google Podcasts every week. And also, if you're looking for information on vacationing and lodging here in the Hayward Lakes area, check out the Hayward Lakes Visitor and Convention Bureau website at haywardlakes.com. Thanks for listening, folks. We're out of time, and we'll be back again next week with another interesting show for you.
Listen with me, I'm gonna take you there to our Wisconsin outdoors, our Wisconsin outdoors.
This program has been produced and hosted entirely by Wisconsin Northland Outdoor Communications. Any and all views expressed are not necessarily those of the station.